It was a crisp autumn morning when I decided to take a break from the hustle and bustle of daily life and head out to Clear Lake for a day of fishing. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting a golden hue over the water, and the air was filled with the earthy scent of fallen leaves and damp soil. I packed my gear, loaded up my trusty old truck, and set off, looking forward to the tranquility that awaited me. Clear Lake had always been a favorite spot of mine. The water was usually calm, the fish plentiful, and the surrounding woods provided a peaceful backdrop for a day spent in nature. I arrived just as the first rays of sunlight pierced through the trees, illuminating the lake's surface like a shimmering blanket of diamonds. I could hear the gentle lapping of the water against the shore and the distant call of a loon echoing across the lake. After setting up my fishing spot, I cast my line into the water and settled into my folding chair, feeling the warmth of the sun on my face. Time seemed to slip away as I lost myself in the peaceful rhythm of fishing. I caught a few small bass, their scales glinting in the sunlight as I released them back into the water. Everything was perfect until I heard it. At first, it was a faint sound, barely audible over the rustling leaves and the chirping of birds. I dismissed it as my imagination, perhaps a trick of the wind. But then it came again, louder this time. A piercing scream that sent a chill down my spine. It was a sound that didn't belong in the serene landscape of Clear Lake. I glanced around, half expecting to see someone in distress, but the area was deserted. The scream echoed again, more urgent this time. And I felt a knot of unease tighten in my stomach. I stood up, my fishing rod forgotten at my side, and scanned the tree line. The woods were thick and shadowy, the underbrush rustling as if something were moving just out of sight. My instincts told me to leave, but curiosity held me in place. I took a few tentative steps toward the source of the sound, my heart racing. It was coming from deeper in the woods, beyond the reach of the lake. As I ventured further, the screams became interspersed with what sounded like frantic laughter, a jarring contrast that sent my mind reeling. I called out, "Hello? Is anyone there?" My voice felt small and insignificant against the backdrop of the forest. There was no response, only the rustling of leaves and the distant call of a crow. The underbrush grew thicker, and I hesitated, the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end. I was alone out here, miles from the nearest road, and the last thing I wanted was to stumble upon something I couldn't explain. I turned to head back to my fishing spot, but the screams echoed again. Sharper and more desperate. It was as if someone or something was calling for help. Against my better judgment, I pressed on. The trees loomed overhead, their branches twisting like skeletal fingers against the sky. I felt a sense of foreboding wash over me, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I needed to investigate. I pushed through the thicket, the underbrush snagging at my clothes as I moved deeper into the woods. Then, just as suddenly as it had started, the noise stopped. An eerie silence enveloped me, broken only by the distant sound of water lapping against the shore. I stood still, straining to hear anything, but all I could hear was my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. I felt a cold sweat trickle down my back, and I turned to leave, my instincts screaming at me to get out of there. As I retraced my steps, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The forest felt alive, the shadows shifting and dancing as I hurried back toward the lake. I broke through the trees and stumbled onto the shore, gasping for breath. The sun was now high in the sky, casting a warm glow over the water, but the tranquility felt like a cruel joke. I packed up my gear in a daze, my hands trembling as I stuffed my fishing tackle into the bag. I couldn't shake the image of the woods behind me, the screams echoing in my mind. As I drove away from Clear Lake, I glanced in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see something lurking in the trees. But all I saw was the peaceful lake, its surface undisturbed, as if nothing had ever happened. From that day on, I never returned to Clear Lake. The memory of that strange noise haunted me, a reminder of the darkness that can lurk beneath the surface of even the most serene places. I found new fishing spots, ones that felt safe and welcoming, but the thrill of fishing at Clear Lake was forever lost to me. The screams echoed in my mind, a chilling reminder of that autumn day when nature's beauty was overshadowed by something sinister. Weeks turned into months, and the chill of winter settled over the landscape, blanketing the world in white. I tried to forget about Clear Lake, to push the memory of that day to the back of my mind, but it lingered like a shadow. I found solace in the warmth of my home, the crackling fire a comforting presence against the cold, but I often caught myself staring out the window, lost in thought. One evening, as I sat by the fire with a cup of hot cocoa, I decided to do some research on the area surrounding Clear Lake. Perhaps there was an explanation for the screams I had heard. I pulled out my laptop and began to search for local legends or stories that might shed light on my experience. To my surprise, I uncovered a series of unsettling tales. The most prominent story involved a group of campers who had gone missing in those very woods decades ago. Locals whispered about strange occurrences in the area, claiming that the spirits of the lost campers roamed the forest, their cries echoing through the trees on quiet nights. The more I read, the more my heart raced. It felt as if I had stumbled upon a dark secret that had been buried for years. Determined to confront my fears, I decided to return to Clear Lake in the spring. I needed closure, a chance to face whatever had haunted me since that day. I gathered my fishing gear once more, but this time I also packed a flashlight and a camera, hoping to document my experience. I told myself that I was merely going for a day of fishing, but deep down, I knew I was searching for answers. When I arrived at Clear Lake, the landscape had transformed. The trees were lush and green, the air filled with the sweet scent of blooming flowers. It was hard to believe that just a few months ago I had felt such fear in this place. I set up my gear and cast my line, trying to relax and enjoy the beauty around me. But the nagging feeling of dread lingered just beneath the surface. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the water, I felt a familiar chill creep up my spine. I glanced toward the woods, half expecting to hear the screams again, but all I could hear was the gentle rustling of leaves. I took a deep breath, reminding myself that I was here to confront my fears, not to run from them. Just as I was about to pack up for the day, I heard it, a faint sound, barely audible over the gentle lapping of the water. My heart raced as the scream pierced the stillness of the evening, echoing through the trees. It was unmistakable, a cry filled with desperation. I felt my stomach drop, but this time I was determined to find the source. With my flashlight in hand, I ventured toward the woods, the beam cutting through the growing darkness. The shadows danced around me, and I could feel the weight of the forest pressing in. I called out, "Hello? Is anyone there?" My voice trembled, but I pressed on, driven by a mix of fear and curiosity. As I pushed deeper into the woods, the screams grew louder, mingling with the sound of frantic laughter. It was a haunting melody that sent shivers down my spine. I stumbled over roots and underbrush, determined to uncover the truth. The trees loomed overhead, their branches twisting like skeletal fingers, and I felt a sense of foreboding wash over me. Then, I broke through a clearing, and what I saw made my blood run cold. In the center stood a group of figures, their faces obscured by shadow. They were gathered around a fire, their laughter echoing through the darkness. But it was the sight of a tattered tent nearby that sent a jolt of recognition through me. It was the same spot where the campers had vanished all those years ago. I stood frozen, my heart pounding in my chest. The figures turned toward me, their eyes glinting in the firelight. They seemed to be aware of my presence, their laughter fading into an eerie silence. I felt an overwhelming sense of dread wash over me, and I took a step back, my instincts screaming at me to run. But before I could turn, one of the figures stepped forward, their face illuminated by the flickering flames. It was a young woman, her expression twisted in a mix of joy and sorrow. "Help us," she whispered, her voice a haunting echo of the screams I had heard. "We can't leave." The weight of her words crashed over me, and I felt the air grow thick with despair. My mind raced as I realized that these were the spirits of the lost campers, trapped in a cycle of laughter and screams. The forest had claimed them, and they were forever bound to this place. I turned to flee, but the laughter erupted again, louder and more frantic, echoing through the trees like a cacophony of madness. I stumbled backward, my heart racing as I felt the oppressive weight of their presence closing in around me. The shadows seemed to stretch and twist, reaching out as if to pull me into their dark embrace. "Help us," the young woman cried again, her voice filled with desperation. "You have to break the curse." I could hardly process her words as panic surged through me. I had come seeking answers, but now I was confronted with a reality far more terrifying than I had imagined. The laughter and screams reverberated in my mind, a haunting reminder of the darkness that lurked in these woods. I turned to run, adrenaline fueling my flight as I dashed back through the trees, branches clawing at my clothes and skin. The forest felt alive, the shadows shifting and swirling as if they were in pursuit. I could hear the laughter trailing behind me, mingling with the cries for help, urging me to stop, to turn back. But I couldn't. I had to escape. I burst through the underbrush and stumbled onto the lakeshore, gasping for breath. The moon hung high in the sky, casting an ethereal glow over the water, but the beauty of the scene was lost on me. I felt like I was being pulled back into the darkness, the spirits of the campers still reaching for me from the depths of the woods. I fumbled for my phone, hands shaking as I dialed 911, my voice trembling as I relayed my location and the strange occurrences I had witnessed. "Please, you have to send someone," I pleaded. "There are spirits in the woods. They need help." The operator's voice was calm, but I could hear the skepticism in her tone. "Sir, are you sure you're not just imagining things? It's late, and you might be experiencing exhaustion. Just stay where you are, and help will be on the way." I hung up, frustration boiling within me. I knew what I had seen, and I couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out for those lost souls. I glanced back at the woods, the shadows shifting ominously. The laughter had faded, but the air was thick with an unsettling silence. Desperate for answers, I remembered the stories I had read about the campers. There had to be something, some way to help them move on. I recalled a local legend about a ritual that could be performed to release trapped spirits, a way to honor their memory and set them free. It involved gathering items that were significant to the lost souls and creating a small memorial. With newfound determination, I gathered stones from the lakeshore and a few wildflowers that had begun to bloom. I arranged them in a circle, whispering words of remembrance and hope. I closed my eyes, focusing on the spirits, willing them to find peace. "You are not forgotten," I said softly. "You deserve to be free." As I finished, a sudden gust of wind swept through the clearing, rustling the leaves and sending a chill down my spine. I opened my eyes, and for a brief moment, I thought I saw the figures standing at the edge of the woods, their faces illuminated by the moonlight. They watched me, their expressions shifting from sorrow to something akin to gratitude. The atmosphere around me began to change. The oppressive weight that had settled in the air lifted, and the laughter transformed into soft whispers, like a gentle breeze passing through the trees. I felt a warmth envelop me, a sense of calm that washed over the chaos of the past hours. As the last echoes of their cries faded into the night, I took a deep breath, feeling a sense of closure. I had faced my fears, and in doing so, I had honored the lost campers. The forest felt different now, the shadows less threatening, the air lighter. I packed up my gear one last time, glancing back at the woods one final time. The silence was comforting, a promise that the spirits had found peace. As I drove away from Clear Lake, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. I had confronted the darkness and emerged stronger for it. From that day forward, I carried the memory of Clear Lake with me, not as a haunting reminder of fear, but as a testament to the power of courage and compassion. The woods would always hold their secrets, but I had learned that even in the darkest places, there was a path to light. And perhaps, just perhaps, the echoes of laughter would no longer be tinged with sorrow, but with the joy of freedom.